Not a problem. Go right ahead. Thank
Okay.
you.
In relation to the Child Welfare League's position in connection with the teenage pregnancy, the Child Welfare League had piloted and continues to operate a program called Choices. This program is geared for pregnant teens, teen mothers, and those at risk. This program began in 1994 in Sangre Grande with approximately 15 teens. Its main purpose was to reintegrate the teen mothers back to the school system and the wider communities. The second area was to also to postpone the postpone childbearing until they were more mature, physically, emotionally, and financially independent. The children of the teen parents are housed at our centers when the parents have to be reintegrated back into the school society, and we look after them there, supporting the children. The Choices program is broken down into 3 areas. Ms. Guy, my colleague, will bring you up to that. And as far as the support of the teen fathers, we have never had the opportunity of having a teen father. The girls, on the other hand, they do not reveal who the fathers of these children are, so we have not had a program that catered for the teen fathers to date. Thank you very much. I'll pass you on to Ms. Guy, who will take us from there.
Thank you so much.
Morning again, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. The program we deliver is 3 core in nature. It is broken down into the academics, where we deliver mathematics, English language as a literacy program, and social studies, general science. We also deliver vocational areas such as garment construction, culinary arts, computer literacy, beauty culture, jewelry craft, health and family life education. It is broken down into the reproductive health and hygiene segment, personal, spiritual, and creative development, communication, and interpersonal relationship. The League faced a lot of challenges in order to deliver this program. Our biggest challenge, however, is being financially able to sustain the program and take it forward. The League noticed a rise in the teenage pregnancy because of breakdown in the family life throughout the nation, including both morally and spiritually. Too many of the homes that the girls come from are unsupervised for most of the times, and the teenagers sometimes have to look after the siblings, leaving them exposed unsupervised for a long period of time. To date, we have approximately 1,200 teen parents passing through the program, where we facilitate services to both teenager and their parents in the form of counseling to the family as well as the girls. Some of our support agencies are the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, where most of the teens are referred to us by the guidance officer and the social worker in the program. The Ministry of Health offers support services to us, to the girls, in form of counseling and helping us with the reproductive and health issues at the program. We also had an outreach program in the primary school area. At that time, we had the common entrance program, now the C program. So after the common entrance program, we would go into the areas, into schools within the areas of our center and do that outreach program dealing with adolescents, the transition adolescents as they go into the secondary school system. But the program was stopped because the Ministry of Education, they had a similar program to ours, a support school service system, and they stopped that outreach program that we had introduced to assist the teenagers as they reintegrated into the secondary school system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can we move to Ms. Anna Maria Moore, a counseling psychologist and author representing the T&T Association of Psychologists?
Thank you, sir.
It's so difficult to address you this formally because I've known you for so long.
Yes, sir. Okay, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members. I am representing Dr. Margaret Naked Chatu. She apologizes for her absence because she had to go out of the country. We thank the Joint Select Committee for the opportunity at present to present at this hearing. Teenage pregnancy is a prevalent issue in our society, and we recognize the need to influence the choices made by teenagers as they cope with the challenges both during and post-pregnancy. While we are aware that the main focus of these discussions have been the reduction of teenage pregnancy rates and the decrease in health risks factors for mother and child, the TTAP would like to address psychological impacts of teenage pregnancy on pregnant teenagers. In most instances, teenage pregnancies are unplanned and are not a choice. And the teenager has to come to terms with the demands. We want to be very clear that teenage pregnancies are unplanned most of the time and are not a choice. And pregnant teenagers have to deal with disapproval, dissatisfaction shown by parents and relatives. Many report psychological distress in the form of anxiety, insomnia, levels of depression, self-esteem issues, loneliness, and lack of social support. The question is psychological distress linked to teen pregnancy or to adverse childhood experiences such as physical and sexual abuse, family dysfunction, and disconnectedness, which may prompt teens to early sexual activity and risky behavior? Another concern is that in many of our school districts, data does not reflect accurately if there is a correlation between the number of girls who are not attending school at present and teenage pregnancy. According to inquiries done in one school district, data shows a dropout rate as high as 75 females between the ages of 14 to 17 for the academic year 2018-2019 thus far. Where are these teenagers? Where is the needed follow-up on why they no longer attend school? In addition, where are the teenage boys and adult males over 18 in this discussion? We need to understand that we must work with our males and we must allow our males to know that they have a stake in what is happening. Knowing where to buy a condom or how to use it does not equate responsible manhood or fatherhood. In closing, it is the hope of TTAP that today's discussion can lead to public health and societal policies as we seek to improve the emotional resilience and choices made by children and teenagers as regards their sexual health. Honorable members on the JSC, you are the influencers in proposing policy and directing political will. Propose mandatory parenting programs for families at risk that can successfully ameliorate the effects not only of family dysfunction, but may have the potential to prevent teenagers and early sexual behaviors in the long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. Can we go to Mr. Fields now, President of the Single Fathers Association?
Morning, once again, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members present. First of all, we are the Single Fathers Association would have experienced quite a bit of challenges when it came to gathering statistics in the first place. When it came to finding statistic on teenage fatherhood, there's a realm of it when you talk about teenage pregnancy when it comes to the mother, as my counterpart here was able to give to you. When it comes to teenage fatherhood, there's a lack of resource, there's a lack of desire, so to speak, from state and even NGOs, I would say, when it comes to harnessing and gathering of statistics. However, in an attempt to have some sense or make some dent into teenage fatherhood, we are the organization, together with the Central Division, TTPS, we would have embarked on a program called the Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee. It wasn't only geared to deal with sexual misconduct, but it was geared to deal with a list of other things like drug abuse, violence in school primarily. But teenage pregnancy and teenage fatherhood was one of the things that we had to deal with there. The only place we were able to gather any type of statistic was from the Ministry of Education, where they were able to give us the number of suspensions, where 105 children were suspended for sexual misconduct. The data didn't go into any further saying how many of them were male, if there was any pregnancy resulting out of this, how many of them were fathers, turned fathers out of this. So we've always had challenges, and I'm very glad to see that you have introduced this part into the topic, because we need to have that data collected for us to be able to develop proper programs. What we've done in the Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee, we've worked together with the 2 Cents movement and a lot of other groups. So when we go to these schools, particularly identified by the principals to be high in sexual misconduct, we're able to have the 2 Cents movement have skits that portray good fatherhood practices and good parenting practices, also best practices on the whole when it comes to sexual misconduct and sexual management. So this is the best that we would have done. We would have pulled the resources that we have around us. We also are not funded by any state organization or anything. We don't get any subvention, so it's within our own capacity and within our possibility of gathering others who have resources to work together with us. We would have partnered with all the stakeholders that would have been mentioned: Children Authority, TTPS, Ministry of Social Development. They are all members of our Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee. And we're looking forward, for support, going forward to continue this throughout Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fields, and continued commendations on your good works. And it was important to include the Single Fathers Association for obvious reasons. Girls don't get pregnant by themselves.
Right.
And that includes, fortunately, on the hand of teenage boys being involved, and unfortunately on behalf of adult males impregnating teenage girls, which is statutory rape. So
totally
I just wanted to clear that up. I'd also like to thank members of the media who are here, who have steadfastly reported very well, including Ms. Alexander and Mr. Douglas, on the inquiry so far, and they've done yeoman's service in terms of getting the information that we have out to the public in a really comprehensive manner. And also, of course, those of you who've made comments on the Parliament channel. Just to quickly go over the data that we've started to work with from the Ministry of Health. The total number of teenage pregnancies reported or presented at public hospitals and health clinics during the past 5 years, 2014 to 2018, amount to 3,577, which is an underestimation, because these are the teenage mothers presenting at public hospitals and public health institutions. And we know not all the births are done at public health institutions, and not all the pregnancies go to full term for various reasons. And there are some abortions, let's be frank, and there are some miscarriages and other issues that terminate the pregnancy. So that number is a microcosm of what is occurring out there. And of course, 2014, 731, 2015, 745, 2016, 850, 2017, fortunately, a dip 575, and it went up again in 2018. And of course, there's a disparity between the 13 to 16 age group, in which 2014 there were 133, and in the 17 to 19 age group, 598, 2015, we saw 128 in the 13 to 16 age group and 617 in the 17 to 19 age group. 2016, 145 in the 13 to 16 age group and 705 in the 17 to 19 age group. 2017, 81 in the 13 to 16 age group and 494 in the 17 to 19 age group. And in 2018, last year, 83 in the 13 to 16 age group and 593 in the 17 to 19 age group. I'm going to quote from a document online, and as speaking to member West about the sociological aspect of that, you would find more in the 17 to 19 age group because they're closer to 18, to adulthood, so you'd find they're having more prevalent sex. But I want to quote from a document which was carried out by the Institute for Study of Labor, IZA, in Bonn, Germany, which is a labor organization focused on research and data gathering, and it's titled, "The Impact of Teenage Motherhood on the Education and Fertility of Their Children, Evidence for Across Europe." The authors are Maria Navarro Panagua and Ian Walker, both from Lancaster University. And this is also underscored by, and this is from 2012, discussion paper number 6995, November 2012, and it was underscored by data I got from the World Health Organization and the UN Department of Research, which stated that the teenage mother, and this is in developed countries in Europe, are 2 to 4 times more likely to have their daughters become teenage mothers. And this is in developed countries where they have resources and programs. 2 to 4 more times the daughter of a teenage mother is likely to become a teenage mother herself. The teenage mother is 40% more likely to drop out of school, affecting her education. The teenage mother has significant impact on her education, her employment opportunities, and the types of jobs she gets because, of course, her educational opportunities are significantly impacted. Her financial independence moving forward through her lifespan is also significantly impacted. Her vulnerability to exploitation is also significantly impacted. Her social interactions, because it impacts her self-esteem and the way society looks at her as a teenage mother and her self-esteem. And it also has, and the study also went on to, or the studies also went on to elicit the harmful impacts on the child of the teenage mother, which is not the remit of our committee, but it's also relevant in the discussion. So I think it's very important that we understand the importance of these kinds of discussions in terms of drafting policy and recommendation to minimize as much as possible. We know it will never get to zero, but that is our aim. All right? So I just wanted to put that on the table in terms of the importance of these kinds of discussions. And I want to break with protocol and start with the gentleman first, if ladies don't mind. Mr. Fields, you indicated it was very difficult to get data. And it is difficult to get data because there are many different NGOs and agencies gathering data, and the data is sometimes quite conflicting. Your association deals with single fathers. Does it include teenage fathers also?
Well, we haven't really seen many teenage fathers come to us, particularly those who have parents. We would have seen more so mothers of sons who would have come to us. Speaking of issues, I mean, under the old Sexual Offences Act of young boys who would have had sexual interactions with young girls and they were being arrested. So in our history, which is not a long history.
When you say young boys, how old are you talking about? Because
boys like about 13 to 16 years old. And at that point in time, I mean, we advocated they were being charged.
There is a Romeo clause in our laws.
No, it's
okay,
now there.
Before, okay.
Before, right. This is predate. You understand? They were being charged at that point in time, and the mothers at that point in time used to come to us because many of them were charged before the courts. It affected them negatively. They couldn't do CXC. Some of them were ashamed to go to school because they were now at school. That was their girlfriend. The perception was their girlfriend, but now they were rapists. They were presented as rapists, so it affected and impacted them very negatively. So that's more so what we had. Not every case, or not any case, did any of them say that a child resulted out of the conduct between the parties, but that primarily has been what has come forward to us. We would have 1 or 2 guys who are now more on the later end, like 19 about to become 20, just about out of the teenage bracket, that would have now, I mean, both legally at the legal age, him and his girlfriend that would have come to the association, wanting the normal information. How can I get access? How can I get custody? How issues about maintenance, stuff like that. But it's primarily the older men more from the 25 to as high as 65 bracket that would come to us.
You're not specifically talking about men who have impregnated teenage girls here, right? You're talking
No.
I just wanted to make that clear. We
No.
The wrong information. Member Hussein.
I just wanted to ask, has the association observed, as a result of what you're saying here, a high demand from your membership to provide support to families and of adolescent and teenage boys?
Well, I wouldn't say the members per se, but I could see that it's a need in society more than anything else, because definitely, whether the members wanted it or not, we at the association, we see the gaping hole there where there's no statistic. I mean, if we go into a school and one thing we were trying to do is to figure out how could we ever know if an adult woman is impregnated by a teenage boy. How do you ever figure that out? Because if she goes to the hospital and has the child, she is an adult. We don't know who the father is, and there's the norm and the social perception that the father left me and went anyhow. So there's no research, there's no investigation to see who the father is. But if it was a minor, rightfully so, if it was a minor that goes in to have a baby, a female, definitely you'd want to know who's the father. So how do we get over that hurdle? Because it has happened many a time where adult women have been impregnated by minor males. So, I mean, even in that aspect, and those are aspects that no one looks at, nobody looks at it, because it's so easy to hide. So, I mean, I hope that by mentioning this here, that people would start monitoring this aspect of it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the Mr. President, Mr. Fields, you indicated in your submission to the committee that you do have a planned student empowerment drive to go into schools. The drive, as indicated in your submission, more or less deals with violence. But is there any aspect of this caravan to treat with the matters that you have identified?
Yeah, definitely. It deals with violence, it deals with teenage pregnancy, gang involvement, bullying, drug usage, a number of those things. And we have the first part of that caravan, student empowerment piece, over violence. We use the same statistic that I mentioned before to identify the schools in the central area that were highest in sexual misconduct, highest in drug abuse, highest in violence. And together with the TTPS and a host of other NGOs and state organizations, we were able to put on that caravan. This was prompted by the Single Fathers Association in partnership with the TTPS to get everyone together. It wasn't a state anything. And we saw it very impactful that we decided to put it forward to even a second stage. And the principals, they were glad for it, to put it a second stage coming in September, where we're going to do a more targeted approach. So it just isn't a one-off caravan. And we start looking at the at-risk students who are affected by the teenage pregnancy, teenage fatherhood, drug abuse, where the NGOs and the state organizations that partner with us could actually make an impact on that particular child's life.
Member Johnny Smith.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to compliment Mr. Randall Fields for the work that you have been doing, more so because you have collaborated with trying to make a police service. And I have been looking at some statistics here, and I noted that NCRHA, which is the Central Regional Health Authority area, is the only area which showed an increased amount of teenage pregnancy when you look at all the different areas, Regional Health Authority. This was provided to us by the Ministry of Health. And it seemed to me that you have been targeting that area. I want to ask you a question. When you targeted that area and you looked to make an impact with young boys or young men or persons who you feel could have been responsible for young girls becoming pregnant, did you at any time think that the persons would not have been in the school population?
No, entirely we believe that as well. They're not only going to be in the school population, they're going to have them in the communities as well. But a start-off approach, the best place we'd have been able to impact, because we tried to use a two-pronged approach, right? We tried not only to deal with teenage pregnancy, but to approach teenage fatherhood for the first time in history in Trinidad and Tobago. So the best place we'd have been able to find teenage boys and teenage girls were easily found at the school, and the schools are already asking for it. And NCRHA as well, they are also a part of the Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee. So what we would do, though, all these organizations, we have meetings, and at those meetings, we expect that the things that we even carry out to the school, we have community-based organizations like Rudan, Dojo, Tashtris Youth Empowerment Committee that work within their communities. So we expect that the experience that they get when we go out to the schools, or even when we have our own meetings or plan and develop programs, that they're going to utilize it in their communities as well. So this is something that wasn't funding or no funds to do it, but we just brought our resources together and decided to execute as possible.
Studies have shown that social factors which contribute to teenage pregnancy include poverty, culture, education, geographic factors. When you were developing your approaches and your initiatives to deal with schools and people in the community, did you look at those factors making an impact and utilize persons from the various ministries or the specialists and expertise in different areas to assist you in your interventions?
Definitely. The thing is, we started this in the end of 2017, 2018 by getting all the organizations together and getting around the red tape. A lot of the organizations who try to bring statistics forward, they themselves, members of the organizations, have challenges to get it as well. So we've identified that, and that's why we had to take an immediate approach. And if you look at the document, I provided a document this morning of the Educational Multi-Sector Committee, you'd see we have a strategy, a mid-term, a long-term. We had to make some immediate action, and we thought at that point in time, together with the TTPS, that a school caravan would have started it off well, and then with more research came in, more data came in from the other organizations, we could start looking at a more targeted approach. That was the only sensible. We couldn't wait to get all the info to then start to work. We decided to start educating the children, at least in the schools, and we have great hopes that it will go beyond the schools into the communities. Even by some of the children that go to the schools, they live in the communities as well. So we expect what we teach them that they go forward. Because one of the very important parts that we may underlook is that after all the skits and the plays and the lessons taught, we have a segment after where we give them prizes and awards and question them on everything that was displayed that day. And you'd be surprised to see how well they answer. So they mean that they're very attentive and they're learning. So I would expect that what they've learned there, they're going to take back into their communities as well.
I just want to apologize to the ladies. I know there's a lot of focus placed on Mr. Fields now because there's been, in our last two inquiries and before, a lot of emphasis placed on the teenage mothers. So I think the fact that we have the male component of this is very important, and that's probably why the committee is focusing a lot on Mr. Fields. That doesn't mean we're going to ignore you. I have one more question from Member Hussein, and we're going to come to you, ladies, all right? So just so you know.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask Mr. Fields my final question before I go on to... have you considered at all have you had any assistance from the other ministries? I hear you speak about the TTPS, but have you had any assistance from the other ministries? Have they collaborated? Have they provided funding? And if you have, can you identify the ministries that support you? All
right. Well, no funding, first of all, but support, yes, because we realize resources just as important. So we'd have the Ministry of Social Development. We'd have, as I said before, the Children Authority. We'd have the Ministry of, even the Office of the Prime Minister. Nearly every ministry that Single Fathers Association works with are involved in that committee. So we have a strong, I wouldn't say we have no support. As I said, no funding, but whatever services, they have National Family Services as well. There's a lot of support from them. So I must say we have the support of the ministries.
Mr. Ford.
Yeah, Mr. Fields, congrats on the work that you have been doing. Remember, funding can come in various forms.
Exactly.
The idea of getting the support from the various ministries, social development, the TTPS, time is money.
Exactly.
Right? Which means so the ones that are coming to give you that support, at least, you know, it could be allocated and budgeted accordingly. And I know Senator West could probably attest to that. But My main question also is the Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee, right? You have identified the central area currently education district.
Yeah.
Now you have been saying that you don't have much statistics to work with, but why was that district identified in order to at least to commence your caravan and the work that you have been doing and so on?
Well, we are situated in the central area, Kunupia, and we've worked well with the TTP as the community police there and engaging particularly the area of enterprise when there was a lot of gang violence and stuff. So we decided to go beyond the community and now go into the school community, because actually it was a call that was made via Facebook to myself and Corporal Small when there was a lot of violence in schools and sexual misconduct in the schools. What were we going to do about it? And this was something that we sat down together, Single Fathers Association with the Central Division Police, and hashed out this program. And then we invited all the other stakeholders, governmental, NGOs, to form the Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee so that we could have entered into the school space.
I noticed, well, again, that's excellent. When I say it's always good to start at home.
Yeah.
And you're thinking of expounding it now to probably other districts.
Yes.
Because I'm sure there would be, even though statistics are unavailable, I'm sure there will be other districts that can benefit from this whole idea of teenage pregnancy, violence, drug abuse, and so on.
Yeah, so what I would say is that since we rolled it out, it got to the ear of the Police Commissioner, Mr. Gary Griffith, and also got to the ear of the Minister of Education. And they have now endorsed it to be rolled out at every police district, using the Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee as the model. So this happened in just last year, so we are seeing that progress, or at least...
Let me bring Ms. Mora and Mrs. Allen Ross, and Mrs. Guy into the conversation. Data provided by the TTPS, or Ministry of Health, regarding the number of fathers identified as having impregnated teenage girls from 2014 to 2018, total at 1,710 identified. Between the same period, we identified for teenage girls presenting at public health institutions, where the 20 to 30 age group were 1,395, the 31 to 40, 146, the 41 to 50, 24, the 51 to 60-year-olds impregnating teenage girls 2, and the over 60-year-olds impregnating teenage girls at 1, and undeclared age 142. Let me start with Ms. Moore on that. I know you're the president of the association, Dr. Naked Chatur, penned an editorial which focused on her concern about the classification of teenage pregnancy as opposed to calling it rape, in many cases as it is, and what the association thinks should be the direction we are taking in terms of arresting that social ill in Trinidad and Tobago. And I know it's a complex issue, but rape is rape. Mm-hmm. And when you have, it's sometimes nice when we use the nomenclature of teenage pregnancy because it sounds softer, but rape is rape, and it is illegal to have sex with a minor in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have these huge statistics of men who are impregnating teenage girls, and it doesn't seem that we are as effective as bringing them to justice. And what the association feels in your discussions is the way to deal with this issue. And then I'll go to the Child Welfare League on the same question.
One of the things yes, we have to, I think education, let girls know, because as Ms. Ross said, they do not identify the fathers, and it's extremely difficult to get it out, and maybe the mothers know who the fathers might be, but do not say anything. But just as we are educating on, the whole issue about LGBTQI coming out and being open and what have you, we must let them know that there is no, yes, being raped by an old, I've had an 8-year-old being raped by a 36-year-old, did not want to say anything to anybody because a mother had said when she had heard it that about another rape, And she said, if that happened to my daughter, and she tell me anything, she will find out. And she decided that she was not going to communicate this with her mother because the mother would have been angry. And she kept it to herself, and it has been a source of serious distress for her. She's an adult now with a child, and you know, I have to do a lot of work with her to get her to feel good about herself and not blame herself, which is what was happening. But I think we need to let people know in this society that it is, I mean, I don't think we harp on it enough about the criminality of it. We do not have people going, like, social workers are supposed to be beating the streets and be in homes, walking, like, let's say there's a community, Maloney, I'm calling Maloney, sorry, but the point is, okay, communities, and each of these communities need to have a cadre of social workers assigned to them so that they can go in there on a daily basis and get to know what is happening in these homes. Because I worked as a caseworker when I was training in New York, and I had 31 children on my caseload, and there are 30 days in the week, plus taking parents upstate to meetings. And it was a daily issue visiting these projects and these communities. You had to beat the streets. You had to get into homes. And I'm not sure what the mandate for the Association of Social Workers is, or the social workers who are trained at UWI. I'm not sure what their mandate is. So that, I mean, we do have to make some policy as to how our homes, what is happening in our homes, and I mean, one of the things is Mariama, my youth center that is located in Aruka, was started because, and this was way back in 1990, because it was an expressed need of parents to have somewhere for their children supervised. Because at that time, we had the junior secondary schools where children were unsupervised for as long as 7 hours every day. Those who were on evening shift were home in the morning, where my parents went to work, and then they had to get themselves to school for 1 o'clock. And then those who were on morning shift had from 12:30 to about 5, 6, unsupervised, because parents are working. So these children found themselves in a lot of, and we need these community programs where young people now, okay, they don't have junior secondaries anymore. But the point is, one of the issues about teenagers is that at puberty, their biology, the whole reproductive system is coming into play.
We're going to talk a lot about sex education in a short while. Let me go to Mrs. Allen on this, and then Ms. Ann Guy.
One of the areas...
Put on your microphone, please. Thank you.
Excuse me. One of the areas that we find is most helpful in our capacity where we work with the girls, despite the fact that they're not giving up who the parents or the fathers of the child, which I find is rather strange, that you're pregnant and you don't know who's the father. I think that is an area that we really, really need to put some more effort into getting, because no girl can impregnate themselves. So we need to look at it differently. We have to get a different approach. I think we need to befriend these girls a little more in that they will feel comfortable enough. Look at us as the outside parent in order to get them to give that type of information, because without it, we are not going anywhere. We are just having teenage mothers with no form of identification. So what are they putting on a birth certificate? These are the things that are important, and I think this is the area that we need to be exploring with all the data that we have at hand. This is one of the areas we need to really push into. One of the hindrances between that would be like finances. And again, to get competent people to handle this type of thing, because it's a sensitive matter. You wouldn't just want to come and talk to anybody. You want to know that you could confide in them. I have dealt with some of these girls personally, And I realized they're looking for attention. And wherever they get the attention is where they lean towards, and that is what we have as a result of that. And it's handed down to the next generation that is coming. Because if their children begin to look up, they do the same thing. It's a cycle that we need to also break.
I like it. It's become a normalized. And let me just quote from the same article I started with, in terms of the main causes of girls who are not forced into sexual activity, participating and becoming pregnant. Self-esteem issues, peer pressure. The peer group are becoming pregnant, so they want to fit in. One. Financial reward, fact of life. Social gaps in their communities. Familial life challenges, so they go out of the home to get needs filled, right? Lack of education. And one of the things that came out of that study, or those studies, is urban density. There were spikes in teenage pregnancies in areas that had significant population density, building blocks when we put people in close proximity to each other. In some of the areas we've seen Trinidad and Tobago and in other jurisdictions, those are things we have to look at in terms of urban planning. I think Member Jennings Smith wanted to ask a question.
I want to ask a question relative to what you just said, Ms. Allen Ross. You spoke about having a relationship with the girls who came to your attention. And I want to ask you, from your own experiences, how many cases those young girls were really actually sure of the partner, or did you have a sense that maybe it could have been sexual promiscuity to the extent where they did not know the father? Tell me, how many times did you have that kind of a suspicion?
Pass that question to Ms. Guy, because she deals with the girls and them one-on-one.
You see, because part of the problem for teenage pregnancy is education, lack of education, and sexual education. So I really want you to tell us your experiences with liaising with some of those girls.
Being the center manager at the center, most of the times the girls might confide in you, but then I am not at liberty to give out information. We have a social worker on board, and I might pass information to her, and she will deal with it. But most of these teenagers, where father is, there's a dash. Most of the girls that I interface with, there are no fathers attached to their children's birth people. None whatsoever.
If I may ask a question, Ms. Allen Ross had indicated that sometimes it was a little bit difficult getting information from the girls, and also that you have to befriend them. But in your submission, you highlighted the greatest challenges of the program is the retention of the teenage mothers to the end of the program and funding to able to run the program to the depth and the quality level for which it's intended. So therefore, because of the time span that they're there, it may be difficult to extract any further information. I want to ask, what is the average length of time a teenage mother stays in the program before they exit?
Okay, it depends on the need of the girls sometimes, the period in which they come in, because most of them express the desire to re-enter the school system. So most of them go back to school, to school in January. So they stay till September with the new term at hand. And then depending on when they deliver, they might even have to stay a little longer. And most of the time they will start in a new term.
I don't understand, and the reason why I don't, because the way you stated that the challenges of the program, for them to stay to the end, because you had I guess a program where you wanted to go in depth and the quality level, for you to impact upon their probably their social, their moral, and every aspect of their life, is very different to a child wanting to return to school. So I'm asking, how long do you expect a teenage mother to remain in your program to be able to get the full essence of what you're hoping to offer to them?
Okay, most of the time they stay 6 months
Yeah,
to 9 months.
6 to 9 months.
Yeah, 6 to 9 months.
after the pregnancy, during the pregnancy?
When we capture them, sometimes we get them before the pregnancy, and sometimes we get them after the pregnancy.
Member Ford.
Just a little follow-up there, Ms. Guy.
Yes, sir.
Repeated pregnancies, in terms of like, one young lady is there, spent her period, had her delivery, the possibility of her coming as a repeat offender. Have you had cases like those? Not offender, sorry. Sorry, wrong word. As coming back as another individual on another pregnancy?
No, sir. The program does not allow for that.
Oh, okay.
Because the program is to delay a second pregnancy. So if you have a second pregnancy,
It means you didn't. The training wasn't.
we didn't deliver. Yeah, it wasn't effective. No.
Okay.
That's a good segue.
I actually wanted to
Member
raise
West.
that issue because a huge problem that we have in Trinidad is by the time some women get to their mid-20s, they have a series of children with a series of men. So is there a program conducted by any of you that seeks to stymie that, and have you seen any success in that program?
Okay. At our program, where we do follow up with the girls. So those that were in the program and they went out to school, we will do follow up on the training to see where they are at. So whether they continue their education or they went to the social programs, and we will do the follow up to see if a second pregnancy was had by the girl. And most of the time, I might say about 3% of the girls that pass through the program really have a second pregnancy, most of the time.
That's a great point upon which for me to deal with the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room, remember Jennings Smith referenced a while ago promiscuity. And in many of these studies that I looked at before coming to this interface today, particularly the one out of Bonn, Germany, they realized through the data collection that what one generation describes as promiscuity, another generation has a different life value and moral standard. And it's always easy for one generation to judge another generation in terms of what they think is normalized behavior. And I'm not saying it's the right thing to do or whatever. I'm just saying what the research has presented. And what I guess our generation considers promiscuity is normalized behavior for generation, next gen they call them, or millennials. And that is a realization that we have to come to if we are to bridge the gap in information. So a lot of the emphasis had been placed in these discussions and in other discussions in Trinidad and Tobago over the last couple of years on the issue of sex education in schools and whether there should be sex education in schools and the importance of and efficacy of sex education in schools in addressing not only this issue but STDs and challenges, other sexual reproductive challenges that may occur later on if people are not aware of what is happening with their bodies through adolescence and puberty when they start to gain sexual maturity, and also their mental preparation for sexual maturity. And if it's the state's responsibility to do that, because we know about that ongoing debate, but what happened in the European situation through this research is a policy direction that started to direct the agencies crafted messages that informed effectively, and they did not have to go through exclusively state agencies to get the messages of sexual reproductive health, responsible behavior, choices and consequences directly to the target group through social media. So my question is, I'll start with Mr. Fields, and it's through your advocacy. What has the experience been in talking to teenage boys or the cohort in terms of reproductive health, sex education, choices and consequences, and the outcomes of those in terms of your monitoring and evaluation of whether the message is getting through and it's eliciting behavior change? Because at the end of the day, if the intervention is not bearing fruit in behavior change, we're wasting time. You have to have an effective policy a mechanism for delivery, and a monitoring device. So let me start with you and go down the panel on that, and your ideas and thoughts on different approaches to getting the messages through, because I think we have to try and circumvent the 20-year-old sex education debate in schools or not, because it's not bearing fruit. Right, let me start with Mr. Fields on that. And that's not to say I am circumventing a parent's right to what their child should be exposed to. Let me put that on the table, because that's part of the debate, and parents have the right to know what their children are being exposed to. But at the end of the day, we as a society also have a responsibility to disseminate information in the interest of the health and well-being of the young people.
Thanks again. And I was about to say that gingerly as well, the importance that I think that sexual reproductive health, more so than anything, is in the school society. But as you rightfully said, there are a number of people, whether it be for cultural, whether it be for religious reasons, that may have some issue based on which direction it goes. But I think it's important, particularly on reproductive health, a young man knowing his body, a young woman knowing their body, knowing the dangers, as you mentioned before, STDs, knowing the consequences of some actions, pregnancy, teenage fatherhood, teenage pregnancy. I think these general things are critical and are needed in the school society. There's something, as I said, that we have already started. And like the point as well when it comes to measuring. So what we would have done, as I said, our first approach was through the caravan. Our second approach is actually going to be the more targeted approach, and then we're going to have an evaluation. And that is why we just selected the 5 most at-risk schools that were identified based on statistics, so that after it would be measurable, so that we could actually see that we made some dent or impact on the school community. So that's one of the reasons we chose the school community and not just the community itself. It's a lot easier to put information together on that in that way as well. But I do say I agree with that the sexual reproductive health is critically important, as I say so gingerly, because I know it is a very, particularly at this point in time in Trinidad and Tobago, it is a very dodgy topic at times. But to me, I think it's very critical and important.
We like tough topics. Ms. Mora.
I have done work with Bishop's Trinity East in Aruka. Oh, sorry. Yes, I have done work with Bishop's Trinity.
I prefer we stay away from calling the names of schools.
Sorry. Okay. A school in the East. Well, it is that they had the foresight to employ me to work with the young people in Forms 5, 4, and 5 who were about to leave school, to work with this whole issue of getting to understand who they are and their purpose in life. We did have a module on sex and the teenager. I also have done it with the Samaru, a community in the East that is considered a hotspot. Through the Citizen Security Program, they funded that program. And I'm very concerned about young people and their whole sexuality, which they do not understand and which we are not trying to help them to understand, because it is a natural, very natural, it is natural when they get to a certain age that they're going to have all these feelings, and they must understand how to manage these feelings. One of the things that we have learned as psychologists, that we must help our young people, we call it sublimation, which is to direct that sexual energy into positive social activities. They must have activities to help them to sublimate that natural sexual energy that is happening for as early as 9 for girls and 11 for boys, so that, activity therapy is something that is so important for teenagers, but a lot of the activity is an expensive process because teenagers have to, to get involved in any kind of sport or get involved in, even when I have camps to take them out, the maxis cost a lot of money. to take them to do things, because activity is something that young people need just to direct that sexual energy into a positive, acceptable social activities. Yes?
Member Antoine had a question, and then Member Amin.
My question deals with the fact in your submissions you said that the health and family life curriculum in the schools, that the teachers were not enforcing it or giving a lot of activity towards it. And you have a proposal for a comprehensive sex education program for the schools. Have you put this forward to the Ministry of Education, or what is the result of it?
We have. I mean, I personally, I think I sent something here too since 2003, calls for policy on sex and teens, and over and over I write in the newspapers, we talk, we have been lobbying for a center where young people and nationals can come who suffer from trauma, whatever type of trauma that they have. Sexual abuse is serious trauma for children and young people. And we have been lobbying for over 10 years for a national psychological trauma center. I don't want to say too much more about that.
I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Part of our remit is to make recommendations to Parliament. So therefore you can give us the
We can send you all the recommendations, the costing for this center, the furniture that is needed, the machinery that is needed. So you can get that, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'll make sure that...
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Ms. Amin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is to Mr. Mora. First of all, I want to just take this opportunity to commend Ms. Mora for her decades of advocacy in this area. You mentioned that you have been engaged by a school in the East to do some work with their teenage girls.
And boys.
As well as the boys.
I worked with the boys, and it was an amazing experience. And it had nothing to do with my being a male. I mean, they did not need a male, and they said that.
All right. And one of the components, because this program, only one of the components has to do with sexual reproductive health, but it is not strictly a sex education program, is that?
That is what, because we had career planning, we had understanding what was all this education, this 5 years of education for, to what end. Because I've found that when young people have a purpose in life, the whole issue about their sexuality gets some kind of respect, because they know where they are going and what they are doing.
My question has to do, I think the Minister of Education has indicated that we asked questions in Parliament about the ministry's intention about having sexual education in schools. And it is a touchy subject, apparently. It has gotten some strong opinions for and against. But based on your indication here that you are working with a school, have you found any other schools that may not be government schools, but maybe board administrated by the religious boards, or private schools, secondary or primary, that have expressed an interest and that have engaged professionals like yourself to do these programs? And perhaps, because I'm asking that, because perhaps the outcomes could inform the ministry and the minister.
Yeah, there are some schools that have engaged professionals, but one of the things about this is that you cannot do something like this for 1 day or 2 days or 3 days. I've been doing this for 29 years with young people, and you cannot invite a professional to come and just talk to a class about sex. You know, this has to be an ongoing thing from Form 1 right up to Form 5, 6. And then By then you would
Form
have...
1 is late, actually.
Excuse me?
Form 1 is late.
Well...
Age appropriate.
I also have My Body, My Own. It's a coloring book for children that you can start at 2-3 years. Good touches, bad touches, what to do when you feel uncomfortable, because we also tell children they mustn't feel. It seems as if only adults feel. So when children fall, hurt themselves, or if something is not happening and they don't feel good about it, no, you shouldn't be feeling so. You're a child. You shouldn't be feeling so. So we have to have children understand that feelings are facts, and if somebody even looks at them or comes and hugs them and it doesn't feel good, something is wrong.
I want to go to Mrs. Allen Ross and Mr. Guy on the issue of your perspectives from the Child Welfare League on sex education, family life education, reproductive health education, and what your experience has been in terms of your delivery of that, if you have, and the results, and then go to Member Hussein, who has a question.
Before Ms. Guy comes on, I want to comment on something that I heard from Mr. Fields concerning the single father, and I think it's an area, the teenage father, sorry. I think it's an area that we really need to delve into, because what I have discovered from my point of, from where I stand, is that these single teenage fathers, not the adult fathers, these single teenage fathers that never came forward, they continue to impregnate other teens that are going down. By the time they reach in the 20s, they have 4 or 5 children with different mothers. This is an area that we have not yet tapped into because we didn't see a reality in it, but there's a reality. Because they're so comfortable, they were not taken out of the school education, they continue their education, they continue to function, whereas the mother will have to come out until she has a baby and then reintegrated. But they don't have that opportunity. They continue as normal. So with that girlfriend they go on to girlfriend number 2, girlfriend number 3, and it continues that. And that is an area that we need to put some emphasis in because it continues to happen. I've seen it happen, and we know. But one of the areas that is challenging to us in that is it will need a lot of monetary gain, that you have to put out something, which we at the league are experiencing a very rough time in getting that type level of work done because there's not sufficient finances to take it through. And then again, one of the other areas we're looking at too is now that the babies are here. What is happening to these children that are not fathered? That is where our society now has been broken down because we have children that are being termed delinquent. According to one person that told me, they call them a pest. These are the names that are given to the children that is coming out from that type of relationship, pest. And the pest is the person who is doing it to these children as the pest, and they're looking at the babies, but it's not their fault. So we have to look at that area. That is one of the areas we need to look at.
Let me just say, I don't want to call anybody a pest. Mm-hmm. And there are underlying reasons for every behavior.
Yeah, but that's what we don't look at.
Experience.
Yeah.
Okay, so while they may have behavior that's not acceptable socially, we have to look at the underlying reasons why they are perpetrating these types of behaviors, right? You can continue.
Yeah. So that is my input in that area. What's the other question you ask?
About the sex education experience in your organization or the family life education or the reproductive health education, however we want to classify it. We know what we're talking about. Again, that area is very, very weak because, again, of financial constraint. There is not much you could do because at the center where the girls are, they're just teaching them like skills and to go back into educational system. But what is there apart from that? These children have needs as well. They have financial needs in the homes that they're going back to after we don't tell them that they're going back. Some of these children are used to get the finances for the homes. So we're telling them about constraint and restraint, but that when they leave us and they go back home, they have to face another game. They have to face the hard, cold fact that maybe if the baby wants a Pampers, what are you going to do? They want milk, what are we going to do? So as much as we can tell you restraint here, when you are facing that child in front of you, we have another breakdown there. So we need to be a driving force and also able to help some of these children back into not only telling them education, but also financially. We need to have something in place for that. Mr. Fields, you want to respond, and then Member Hussein and Member
Yeah, I would like to respond. I understand the passion from the
Welfare League.
From the Welfare League. I understand the passion from the Welfare League. But we need to understand that these single teenage fathers are children too. They are boys as well. You understand? And I just painted a story of the young boys that were arrested, and many a time, yes, they may have impregnated someone. And the thing is, we say impregnated someone. The reality of this, many a time, they were boyfriend and girlfriend in school. They thought they were in love. They had sexual interaction, and a child was a product. The boy, as I could have felt your passion, is made to feel that he impregnated and he has now committed an offense against the young girl.
Well, to be fair, sometimes boys force girls to have sex also.
And I'm not talking about a situation like that.
You're talking about...
I'm talking about generally, because the boys that we have dealt with are not boys that forced anyone. There are boys many of the times that were timid, boys that were actually led into sexual affairs by older girls that were teenagers as well, or even younger girls that were more sexual, that had a more sexual promiscuous life than them. So if a child is to be the product of a relationship like that, is the boy such an offender, or does he need help as well? So we need to look at it from that perspective. I understand the point from the Welfare League, but I'm just being very careful that we don't forget that even the boy is a child as well.
That's why I indicated earlier on classifying things as promiscuity, and you need to understand the underlying reasons for the behavior before you can deal with the behavior. We have a question from Member Ford and Member Hussain.
And again, it follows up to what Ms. Allen Ross is saying, and also what Mr. Fields is now saying. And therefore, why this particular young man is not coming forward to present his name, or the young lady is not presenting this young man's name in order that help can be forthcoming.
Yeah. Well, in the past, you would have been charged for having sex with. You would have been arrested.
But may I say something? The fact that he's not coming forward, he's continuing that trend. He's having other babies. It hasn't deterred him anyway. They're fathers of 3 and 4 different children. Sometimes when they reach back in the school system, there's a fight.
That's a general statement.
Okay, one of the issues that I think this discussion, heated as it is, and I appreciate that, raises is the issue of, and it was cited in the study I cited also, the issue of young men, their sense of identity, their sense of masculinity, and what that means in the context of their decisions to engage in types of behavior, and also the issue of responsibility and what that means when they make certain choices to engage, just like the girls, in sexual activity and the outcomes, because as we all know, because of physiology and societal constructs, it is normally the girls who are left and the families to take care of the child. So, Mr. Fields, with that said, what has the Single Fathers Association's experience been in that type of advocacy, where, and we know boys take cues from their society just like girls, and we live in a somewhat machoistic society where, when boys have a lot of sex, they are macho, but girls are classified as something else. Right. And it is a difficult norm to break in terms of a young man who is not disconnected from his society being influenced in a particular type of lifestyle or behavior choice, because he sees examples of that glorified, and we don't have advocacies where he can develop a different kind of sense of what being a man is, for Caribbean masculinity moving forward.
In our experience, I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but the prevalence of repeating such an act, meaning that many of these boys that have come to us and they've came with their mothers, 90% of them, they don't even want to see a young lady after, because they've been charged, they've been brought before the court, they've been made to feel as if they were rapists when they thought that they were in a relationship and they were in love. I am not saying that it may not have the case where one particular child who has another issue that continues a cycle and he's continuously getting people pregnant.
No, I want to focus on the solution now. We get that. I want to focus on what your advocacy has been in terms of trying to establish with young men a trend of thought or a sense of self that inspires a different kind of behavior pattern and a different kind of choice.
And you see, that's the start of the conversation that we have to have, because we can't advocate without people understanding that side of it as well. Understanding that even the young male himself, even he himself is afraid, even he himself sometimes feels like a victim after. We can't relate to them until even society understands that. And sometimes, so the reason that they're less forthcoming, or the reason that they make these decisions to hide, is because we are ready to attack them from society.
I think you're missing my point. I'm trying to get to the issue of socialization of young men, and by extension women, and the choices they make to engage or not engage in certain types of behavior. Right. I'm not talking about in this stage, the issue of multiple impregnations or multiple interactions. I'm talking about how we socialize young men, and by extension young women differently, to make better choices in terms of their responsibilities for their own behaviors and the consequences of those responsibilities.
Well, definitely, but to me that's a different question now, right? So definitely, we understand the culture we have, as you rightfully said.
Let me give you an example. Young men, including myself, get to 21 and are chastised by their peers for not having a child. What is wrong with you? You're gay, you're infertile, not in such classic terms, and it is a neighborhood block thing where a young man has to prove himself by becoming a father very early, sometimes as early as teens, because his cohorts are doing that. And he feels pressured by his cohorts and society to express his masculinity by becoming a father. Fact of life. How do we counteract that? How do we imbue a different sense of self and masculinity from young men who are pressured by society into a particular type of behavior and choice?
All right. And what I'm saying is that I don't want to disagree with you. I'm not saying that they are pressured into becoming a father, but I could understand when you say they're pressured into the sexual interaction, or they should have multiple women, a number of these things, right? That's the point that you're getting to. And it's something that we highlight from the organization and advocate against all the time. Look at some of the ads that are being promoted, whether it be from corporate or not, on television. We highlighted just very recently an ad, I saw they take it down. I'm not going to say who it was about, where the whole promotion was a man was cheating on his wife. A man had multiple women, and it was a man's thing to do. So at the end of the day, we've been putting things out into society, spreading that message for years. That this is what a man does. This is why young boys, a young boy who has been sexually penetrated, meaning by an adult woman, he feels nothing is wrong with him. He feels no offense is committed against him because he's a macho man. And if he goes and he tells a group of men or a group of women what happened, they might give him a bounce, opposed to say, hey, an offense was committed against you. You understand? And that is the reality of it. That's how we culture young boys.
How do we counteract that? And then remember Hussein and then remember Ford.
But that is it by changing changing the narrative, putting things with more positive out about what manliness is, and I see a number of companies doing that now, a number of NGOs doing that, manly men doing that. We at Single Fathers Association, when we see ads like the ad we saw, saying something about it, that's the most that we could do, and making those people take it down. So these are the things that we've been seeing in society, we've been putting out by society, whether it comes from state, whether it comes from corporate. These are the things that we have been telling young boys, that this is what a man is. So we've been culturing our society to believe so. So whether they've learned that from their peers or whether they've learned it from their parents, they just turn on the TV and they've learned it right there. So we all have a part to play when it comes to be responsible for this kind of behavior.
Thank you, Chair. I think if I had asked this question, they would have broken the trend of the conversation, and I think it's relevant now. You had indicated, the chair had indicated that from an article that out of Germany, and he spoke about the behavior of the child and being why it is they would do certain things, and one of the things was low self-esteem and so forth. And I was just wondering if the Single Fathers Association recognizes the fact that an absentee father in any home allows for a child to grow up with low self-esteem, and if this was a part of your whole education program, where it is fathers were encouraged, regardless of the relationship they had with the mother, which could be very combative, whether it was important for that father to present himself as a person who could be loving and caring towards and the well-being of the child, and putting aside any differences that may be prevalent.
Ma'am, we've gotten that a very long time ago. The judiciary still doesn't seem to have gotten it. Because the precedent for a man who wants to be involved in a child's life is 4 days a month. We've spoken about this numerous occasions. We had a JSC right here when we lamented. And it's not for precedent for a man, it's precedent for a non-custodial parent. We, however, are most times the non-custodial parent. We presented the evidence to the JSC here of that research, where a man and a mother and a father on equal footing, no abuse taking place, is twice unlikely to receive custody or care and control of his child. Right? Shared parenting at our family court is at the level of 2%. So when it should be actually not 66% to mommy or 32% to daddy, and more possibly about 60% shared parenting, it is non-existent in our judicial system. So despite there are a number of fathers who want to be involved, yes, we always harp on the guys who do not want to be involved, but I often say we are the fathers today that grew without the fathers yesterday. So we understand the significance of being the fathers today. The bad thing is that we have to deal with the stain of the fathers of yesterday. So that same social perception of fathers not wanting to be there and fathers step up, I can tell you now, you could want to step up how much you want, but until the system itself starts to recognize the value of fatherhood, and the very same thing what you said about father absenteeism, then we will reach nowhere in a hurry.
And Member West and then Member Ford.
On another point, Chair, to Ms. Mora, you had mentioned briefly in your opening statement about the introduction of mandatory parenting sessions. Can you expand on that a little bit? And if you were not focusing on issues like the parent who prevented the 8-year-old from reporting the rape that she had suffered, how do you treat with that, since mothers or parents in the home are the biggest influences and will continue to be the biggest influences on the life of the teenagers who we are seeking to assist?
Okay. Can I just speak to what Mr. Field said about fathers? One of the things I've recognized, and over the years in all my work, started as a teacher a long time ago, that there were men with multiple homes, 3 and 4 women with children. And I asked Mr. Grant last week, which home would we want him to go in? When we asked for fathers back in homes, he might decide to choose the last woman and marry her. And many times there are children who are the same ages, and this gentleman who would have married the 4th woman is not allowed to interact with the mothers of the other children because she is so very insecure, thinking that he's still in a relationship with those mothers.
Ms. Moore, I hate to interrupt you, but we have 15 minutes left, and I really want to focus on the teenage pregnancy aspect of it.
Okay, the thing about it is, the whole issue, I think, I didn't bring the act with me, but I know that if the couple, the boy and the girl, maybe they were at school or art school and he is just about 2 years older than she is, there will not be, because it is that young people will experiment, and a lot of times pregnancy will come because it's unplanned, but it came out of the
Specifically
experiment.
to the question Member West asked about the situation where the parent is chastising the child and the child is reluctant to report the rape, in the case that you cited at 8 years old,
Yes.
and the parent being the most influential social agent in that child's life.
Parents would need to get some information on their children and their sexuality. Parents have to not forget how it was for them. Parents, I find, are not empathic when it comes to teenagers. They forget what it was like to be a teenager going through this whole issue about moving from childhood into young adulthood and all the biological changes that happen and what you know, their whole view of life. Parents are not, I mean, we take care of children from birth to maybe about 10, 11. As soon as puberty hits, we treat them with a very long pole. And we have done parenting programs with TTAP and have put in this whole sense, this whole thing of sexuality. There is this that I hand out to parents, how to talk to your children about sex. And it is from birth to what you need to do, common questions children have. This is a very short handout that parents, and how to be an approachable parent. I photocopy these things and hand them out in the communities.
Okay, question from member Antoine.
Yes, this question is Mr. Fields. You said the second phase target approach will begin in September. What other schools would be involved? Where? Because the first phase was in Central. And how are you improving your product that you are giving to the youngsters?
Well, this phase will continue in the same 5 schools. So these are the schools that we went to prior and did the general caravan, spoke on particular topics. So this phase now will be going into the schools, and the children that are identified by the principal as at risk confidentially, they will group them and start working with them. That this second phase would be, we have the student support services involved. We have, as I said, the Children Authority, the Child Protection Unit, the Victim and Witness Support, the National Family Services. We have NIHUS. We have a number of stakeholders that are part of this multi-sector committee. There are a number of programs that they're bringing to offer to these children. So we're going to be doing that part. And then, as we said, after the third part would be the evaluation to see what impact we had on violence, what impact we had on teenage pregnancy, what impact we had on all of the other things that we targeted there. The document that I would have provided this morning, they would show a detailed breakdown of the short-term and long-term goals of the Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee.
Member Hussein first, and then Member Jennings Smith, please. If it's a follow-up question, you could go ahead.
Yeah, you indicated that you have had intervention with young men who would never want to see a woman again in his life. And I want to ask you the question. I know that there have been times when young men would have been brought before the court.
Right.
And I want to ask you what kind of services you render to those young men, because most of the programs are offered for first-timers. And I look at second chances. What program you offer for those young men having been involved in that particular activity, and to prepare him for his life ahead?
All right. Well, at that time, we had no program that we could have offered the young men. But after making all these collaborations, I would say, as I mentioned, with the Central Educational Multi-Sector Committee, with even the members of the Children's Court, they are part of it as well. So as I said, going forward, if we are to have young men that encounter these things, we involve them because we know if there's an offense committed at the school, that's where the children have to go to. So I think it's legal, I forgot the exact name, legal duty, I think, who represents them, legal aid, who represents the child and stuff like that. They are part of the committee as well. So we kind of have everybody involved, and not only for school duty, even for SFAT duty, where I say I could use or utilize one of the other stakeholders that are part of that committee, we will utilize them going forward.
Sorry, on the second part, because what I looked at is I followed a particular case where a young boy had sex with a girl, and a baby was born, and I've lived to see that particular baby, who was also a boy, encountered the same issues and as well, and also ended up in prison. And I really wanted Ms. Mora, but I know she can't answer at this point in time, but I wanted to take recognition of that issue where it also happens in a case where a young man engages in that act because it's a highly psychological issue with the mother who has the child, and most time it is not the parent of the child who reports, but rather the grandparent who reports the sexual activity to the police.
All right, I understand that.
Member Hussain.
Thank you, Chair. This question is directed to Child Welfare League. Based on your submission on page 3 concerning the Health and Family Life curriculum, you indicated that your outreach program was stopped by the school support system of the Ministry of Education when they introduced a similar program. Could you indicate whether the program that was introduced is how similar was it in with yours? Is it still continued, and how effective is the program, please? Thank you.
Member, we did the outreach program, adolescent, the adolescent mothers program to the primary school, because these kids were going off to secondary school, you know, going into that vulnerable state. And the program, the Ministry of Education, they did a similar support service. So they said it was like conflict of interest, that what we were doing is the same thing that they were introducing into the school system.
When did it end?
That could be in 2016.
And did you have the opportunity to see the program that the Ministry of Education put to the schools, and whether it was there was any contrast in what information was being presented to the young children?
No, member.
You didn't?
No.
Okay. So you don't know how effective the program is?
No.
All right.
Member Ford.
Hey, members, just 3 quick questions to basically the panel. In terms of your outreach programs methodology, right? Do you all cater for working among? Any of you all worked among yourselves? Like, for instance, single fathers. Have you worked with the?
No.
With Ms. Mora.
Ms. Mora and I were on the Child Protection Task Force together, though.
Right, but in terms of single fathers actually working to say, look, come and be part of me in this program, I'm working in Central.
No.
And what about the social welfare? Have you engaged any of those 2 other individuals?
No, we did not make, as a matter of fact, the single fathers is a new group, and we have not had that interaction with them at all. We have not connected with any other stakeholder.
So after today, we can
I am looking forward to that, as well as I'm looking
Mm-hmm.
forward to us putting something in place to get the teenage fathers. A program should be set up that we make some kind of connection with teenage fathers.
Right. Secondly, do you all work along with any faith-based organizations, both 3 groups?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
Right. So in
Most
terms
definitely.
of abstinence,
And
no
the
sex
mo-
before
and moral
marriage and so
values.
on,
Moral
those
values,
things,
yes.
those things could come up
Yes.
in your sessions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And finally, our teaching system in Trinidad and Tobago, would you, especially to Ms. Mora, I know you have been in the vineyard for many, many, many years, right? I know you're doing a lot of work, you know, on the East-West corridor, at least, you know, where I am. In terms of it skewed towards a disadvantage to our male youths. For example, simply put, most of our teachers are female. We go to faith-based organizations, most of the people teaching there is female. You know what I mean? What's a quick comment on that?
Well, I have had no problem with working with young men. They're very, very open. It depends on how you do it. I think people have to be trained to work with teenagers. They have to have certain characteristics, non-judgmental, you know, genuine. I think it can happen. I also do some work with trainee counselors, master students, and again, we have maybe 4 men in the class of about 28. There would be 4 men. And I'm not sure if we could keep harping on getting more men because there is I don't think men are able to take care of their families on a counselor's salary these days. So men will not gravitate I don't think they gravitate to teaching either. But we have to do some kind of outreach program to young men who are in fifth form, and to just as we do career planning with them and have career days where pilots and people come and talk, we should have those male teachers who are doing well. There are a few of the young men who I worked with who became male teachers and are doing very well in the system. So I think we have to identify those male teachers and bring them into those schools, just as we bring the flight attendants, the pilots, and all those other, the nurses and the firemen and what have you. We need to identify male teachers who are doing well in the system, who are not absent from school every 2-3 days, and bring them in to talk to young men about teaching as a career.
As we seek to close, I'm going to ask for final comments from each of the panelists before us. Let me start with Ms. Guy first, please.
Chair, Vice Chair, members, I just want to thank you all this morning for accommodating the Child Welfare League. Moving forward, if we could have more financial aid to our organization for us to continue this much needed program that we have embarked on. I personally would like to see teenage pregnancy eradicated, but I know that is far from ever happening. But that we could put both male and female in a better stead. The girls, they take slowly to move on, where the male, they remain in the system and they just, you know, because even if the girls re-enter the system, they go back stigmatized. So we have to do lots of preparation in order for them to go and be successful. So again, I want to thank you all.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Allen Ross.
I think that we need to put some more work in place, more education, starting from our primary level concerning preteens and teenage pregnancy, and more so to get more of the male involved in these classes. We have to do something more centered around the fathers, potential fathers, that they too will come into it so that we can stop it from starting in the school, primary, because we have it from primary schools. So we have to put the education from there, preventative. And I think this is where we need to concentrate, how to get more information into our primary school areas to combat with this teenage pregnancy. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, there is some research that shows that fewer American teens are engaging in sexual activity because there are so much more activities for them that can be accessed free of charge in their communities. And this is one way when we give young people a reason for being born. There are many young people who they don't know why they were born, because they were born by chance. And once we help them to understand that they have a future and that their future will depend on the choices they make today, I think things could turn around.
So much, Mr. Field.
Firstly, I'd like to thank the committee, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and members for inviting the Single Fathers Association here, giving our perspective, which I believe is a new perspective. I think primarily what is very important for us to focus on is sexual misconduct between these teenagers. I highlighted before that 105 students were suspended in 1 year. All of these could have resulted in pregnancies. I understand the pit between the teenage pregnancy of women and the teenage fatherhood of boys and girls, sorry. But I think if we really focus on sexual misconduct and trying to minimize or carry that down between these teenagers, obviously we're not going to have babies being born. So I think a focus on that is critical and important.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Ms. Cheryl Ann Guy and Mrs. Cheryl Ann Ross, Center Manager and Regional Coordinator, respectively, of the Child Welfare League, Ms. Anna Maria Mora, a counseling psychologist, author, and of course representing the TNT Association of Psychologists, and also Mr. Ronald Fields of the Single Fathers Association. Thank you all for your contribution here today. We appreciate you being here. We'd also like to thank members of the media who are there and observers in the public gallery, and those of you in the viewing and listening audience. We'd also like to advise that the committee's report on an inquiry into the potential benefits of traditional, complementary, and alternative medicine in the treatment of non-communicable diseases affecting Trinidad and Tobago was recently presented in the House of Representatives and the Senate and is now available for your review on the Parliament's website, www.ttparliament.org. Thank you for viewing and listening, and this meeting is now adjourned. Look at that time, look at that time.